Good morning, friends. It's April 9th, 2019. I'm going to be doing a sort of autobiographical piece this time, trying to stay in shape with YouTube skills, getting them out. So, Documentary City is a blog post from Monday. Today's Tuesday, so yesterday. And I had just gone through a marathon of watching Adam Curtis movies. If you don't know who that is, let's just say a BBC movie filmmaker, a filmmaker who I associate with the BBC, but he made The Power of Nightmares, and that's big in my blog. So, like a long time ago, though. By a long time ago, I mean 2006, and it's 2019 now. So, like 13 years ago, over a decade, I saw this Power of Nightmares downtown, and it made a big impression. And I haven't really kept up to date on these later movies by the same filmmaker, so I was catching up. And on Facebook, I'm talking about that those movies mention Libya quite a bit, and our family moved from Rome, or actually from Portland, Oregon, where my dad was a planner, right, and a city planner. And I think he was getting a taste of what it was going to be like to, in the U.S. it was about urban renewal and Robert Moses, and to do significant city shaping, one would have to condemn large areas or change them drastically. So the plans were all about like relocating people and running freeways through old neighborhoods. I mean, it was going to be a very political job, and I think Dad's interest all along had been to work in developing countries. Connecting to this is this video about Coney Island and the history of the Trump family there and redevelopment. So I would love to see better timelines on the web somewhere, like how can I sync up the Robert Moses timeline and the Trump timeline and so forth. Where's timelines.com in a really good way? I've talked about this with a bunch of people. It's hard to do a good graph database of even major historical figures and where they fit in, is my view. Speaking of which, so I'm going to get wind to a close here. Back to hypernormalization and the Adam Curtis movies. Where would some of the history that I'm most interested in wire up to this terrain that Adam is taking over here? With lots of great archival footage, too. I learned so much from these films. Well, Century of the Self, where he gets into Werner Erhard, would be an obvious place to jump over to the Bucky stuff, right? Because after Est was everywhere in that 80s, late 70s, Erhard latched onto Bucky Fuller as his teacher for then. Then things went on from there. Bucky died in '83. I became interested in Erhard and then Bucky in that sequence. I'd known of Bucky growing up, like in Italy, when Dad was working for Libya, right? He liked the wide open. You needed to zone how things would grow, like how could Tripoli grow, but it wasn't about, pushing a lot of people out of the way. I think he enjoyed that kind of work. And later it was Egypt, and in Bhutan it was more like schools, where to put them, build, and studies of that nature. Anyway, he had a very interesting career, and I was very privileged to get to go to all these places around the world and see what it was like. Okay, so I would wire, if I were doing the next Adam Curtis film and I wanted to jump into the Bucky stuff, I'd probably jump off from Century of the Self and go in through Erhard and then mix it up with that group. Like, Ed's gone, but we have some documentary footage of him, interviews with him. The Montreal structure is still there. I'd say there's enough for a whole film here, but there's a lot of people who write Bucky off, and I think it's because they don't get the logic behind. In other words, they don't appreciate synergetics for being a structured work that actually does hold together more than they imagine it does. with the alternative modeling of second powering, and therefore also an alternative modeling of third powering. You need that in order to get a unit volume tetrahedron that has simple edges. Like, it's easy in Cartesian math to have a unit volume tetrahedron, but the edges are what? It's like you have to not keep it as simple as we want. So there's a whole logic here, a language game worth exploring. And for that to happen, we have to get more of a university track going, which is the subject of other videos of mine. So take a look at those and be a part of this forgotten thread. I think you would find a lot of low-hanging fruit here. All right, we'll talk more. Good to get a YouTube out.